second virtual Bath Life Business Club. It's been a little while, but we are rekindling these business clubs. Those of you who were on last week, and thank you for all your kind comments. We're rekindling what were physical business clubs as these virtual events, and I'll explain some of the process and rationale for that. But I think first up, we hope that you, your loved ones, your teams are safe in these bewildering, utterly bewildering times. Times when we can't work, and we'll be exploring some of those points. At least many of us can't work. We'll be exploring those with our panelists. Times when we don't know when we're going to return to work. We can't necessarily plan. We've no idea what the economic landscape might look like come, well, whenever that is. And times when, frankly, we can all do with hearing each other's experiences and thoughts. And that's the rationale for these Tales from the Lockdown. That's why we're doing it. Thanks for all the positive comments we had from last week. Please, by all means, share the link to your colleagues and contacts. If you didn't rate it, well, perhaps go easy on the sharing, but let us know, because everything is always improvable, and we want these to work for as many people as possible, these weekly webinars. Next week is a hospitality special of all the sectors that are hit. Well, we're all hit, but hospitality in particular faces multiple difficulties. So it's specific to hospitality sector, but by the nature of hospitality, it impacts pretty much everyone in Bath, either commercially or personally, of course. Meantime, before we start, I just wanted to say it's been really touching to see the brilliant and thoughtful, helpful, supportive actions that people and businesses in Bath have taken to support each other in these tough times. We've been sharing those through social media and also through our weekly Bath Life newsletter using the hashtag Bath Together, and we'd encourage you, and despite the slight oddity of Bath Together, to do likewise. On to our speakers today. We'll be hearing from, in order, Allison Herbert from Bath Bid, Roanne Wootten from Julian House, and Simon Morris from Kingswood School. We'll be running short discussion interviews, about 10 minutes with each of them. Please, throughout, if you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little Q&A option. By all means, send your questions. They can be anonymous if you wish, but otherwise in your own name. We will try to come to as many of those as possible. We'll collate those and use those live in the second part of this discussion. So let's come on, if I may invite Allison to step to the virtual stage and to unmute yourself and devidify, whatever the word is, yourself. Allison, are you on?
Yes, hello.
You are indeed. Good morning, Allison. And first off, I'd just like to ask you personally, how have you been responding? How has it been for you and your domestic setup and so on?
Well, I'm working from home, so apologies if the dog barks. We were talking about it earlier, weren't we? And I think that's been one of the most interesting things, is that the reality of people's work-life balance is coming to the fore, and we're all understanding what everybody is balancing in order to be able to work from home. And I do sympathise for the parents who have younger children. Luckily, mine are a bit older. Obviously, we have a mix of a kind of working types, I guess, amongst the bid. So the Ranger team that everybody knows and loves, we've kept two of those throughout the lockdown period. My dog's crying. I don't know why.
You're not that bad. I mean, it's been quite good so far.
And they've been dealing with, offering support to those businesses who've stayed open. So making sure that it's clean outside Waitrose while you queue, and picking up on any sort of antisocial messes that there are around the city. And then this week, there's been a lot of graffiti, and so they've been working really hard to try and help the city at least look, presentable while nobody's there, so that it's not such a big job when we all come back into the city.
Well, let's come on to that from a business planning point of view. What have been your priorities, and how have you attempted to reconcile the opportunity to do whatever you wish to do with the ability and need to do it?
Wow. So our priorities have been to provide information, first of all. We know that we're a really key network for the businesses who are our members. So we've made a lot of effort to make sure that we're circulating information, but also not trying really hard not to be just another channel of noise in people's ears. So we've been working closely with Visit Bath and the council to make sure that the information is at the very least coordinated, so that, you know, it's not 20 emails a day. In the first few days, it seemed like there was something new that people needed to understand and you know, have the links to or whatever every day. But now that's slowed right down. And we're dealing with more rumours, I suppose, than concrete sort of announcements. But so the focus was very much on sort of being reactive and communicative. And then gradually, as time went on, we were able to adapt our model so that it was the most useful. And in a way, that grew as people were communicating with us and telling us what they needed. And then in pure practical terms, because the way that the bid is funded is by contributions from all the businesses in the city centre, we also looked really hard at our costs, so that we could be as lean and mean as we possibly could and deliver the you know, the baseline, the brilliant basics, I guess I call them sometimes, but the line of services.
In very rough terms, how much is your budget now compared with what it was due to be? How much of a cut have you had to take?
We don't know yet, because what we've invited businesses to do is actually defer for 3 months. So during this really difficult time, while they're working out if, you know, how they're going to reopen, when they're going to reopen, and what that's going to look like, we've said, you know, don't pay us until July if that helps. And right. Lots of people have taken us up on that offer. So we have our bills went out on March the 6th. So some people in that massively efficient way paid straight away. So, you know, we're in a really fortunate position that some people have actually paid their bid levy already. And we're just looking, it was announced on Friday that the government's going to give some support to bids, financial support to bids. It's just over 6 million. So if we get a fair share of that, it might be, you know,
it's all helpful. I want to come on to the bid levy in a moment, but I just wanted you to give your somewhere between personal and professional view of what the city centre of Bath might look like come the autumn, come the spring next year. With you having 650 levy payers, with, by the nature of centre of Bath businesses, probably over-indexed on hospitality generally and entertainment and retail, of course. What will the topography of Bath look like, do you think, in a few months' time?
I'm anticipating that it will look very different. And there's an awful lot of businesses that rely on our international visitors, and every survey and every piece of research that's coming out is telling us that international travel is going to be much smaller than we've got used to, I suppose. And so I think those that depend most on the international market will be the ones that will have to adapt the most. And I guess how willing and how able they are to adapt is going to probably be one of the key determinants of their success.
And what are the levy payers saying about, I mean, this is evolving on almost a daily basis in terms of governmental advice, but it looks as though companies will be able to come back in reasonably short order, but will have to preserve social distancing inside the companies. We'll have to be wearing PPE in offices, which at this stage does seem somewhat of a barrier. What do you think the challenges are for social distancing for bid companies inside the businesses?
It's all about planning. They've got to make sure that they're completely ready if they do have to have PPE. If we are coming all back in, you know, in 10 days' time, which is one of the hints that we've heard, there's going to be a huge draw on PPE. We happen to have it at the bid because we have to use chemicals in the city, but other businesses won't in the normal run of things. So I guess there'll be another run on PPE in the same way that has already been. And I think the government are working through that at the moment anyway. So, but also understanding how, there's been some discussion about if you're an office business, maybe staggering the times and limiting the times when you're actually in the office at the same time. And for retail businesses, there's a lot of guidelines that have come out from the British Retail Consortium about how to prepare your business both inside and outside. So actually standing back, having a really good look at your premises and saying, well, how many people can I safely fit at a 2 metre distance? And if you're running a restaurant, then you're looking at a 6 metre, 6 metres, that would be really bad, a 6 foot cordon, a 2 metre circle around every table in your restaurant, which clearly is going to really limit your capacity. And I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about this already, but how can you have enough customers in your restaurant to make it worth firing up your kitchen?
We'll explore some of the latter points next week in our hospitality special. And just to say in advance, I think particularly, as we all know, in many Bath restaurants, they're quite cramped, and they have to be cramped because the cost of space is so high. And if you then, whatever the word is, decramp that, it makes it an economic nightmare, presumably, but certainly a major challenge. I just want to come on to the broader point about Bath Bid. I mean, there is absolutely no good time for a pandemic ever, full stop. However, it's a particularly awkward time for the Bath Bid. You're going through a process, I guess, of seeking renewal. Your current plan, I think, was to put a questionnaire out in October with a view to it, the renewal, if you get the support, from April of next year. How are you, as a managerial point or a professional point, how are you trying to manage that process to try to get support when companies are fearful about their existence, let alone any sense of longevity?
Well, my view is that we carry on doing the very best job that we can, and if it's the right job, then people will want it to continue. That's my sort of heart, if you like, response to your question. But in practical terms, what we're doing is completely revisiting the business plan. So where in times of more plenty, I suppose, you could have a very expansive business plan. What we're looking at doing is reducing the levy charge, the percentage that we charge, and working out what baseline services we can provide, and really scrutinising those services very carefully. So what are the ones which save businesses money or really derive benefit to them? So we're giving ourselves a really cold, hard look in the mirror, and I'm working very closely with the board, on bringing forward a very different looking business plan, which and some of the sort of really marvellous projects that the bid have been involved with historically, like Bath in Fashion and those sorts of things, those would become part of a discretionary activity where we would have to fundraise and bring people together and deliver that sort of thing.
Well, we wish you and indeed all our panelists, in fact everyone on this call, all the best in these troubled times. I've just got one last more general business question. Many of our businesses in Bath, we are using the furlough scheme. We're at Media Clash, absolutely so. We've got about 35, 40 people on furlough. Do you think government will act to extend / taper the furlough, or is the assumption is June 30th, that's it?
Well, I wish I knew, but they are under a lot of pressure from all of the business organisations that I'm aware of to taper the furlough scheme, because it's going to be a bit of an edge of a cliff sort of dropping off moment. And also then there is talk about them graduating the furlough scheme further so that it would be remain in force for certain industries. And again, I wish I wish I was a fly on the wall and could know those conversations, but obviously as soon as we know, that's exactly the kind of information we'll be sharing.
Yeah. Okay, Allison, for now, we'll bring you back in a bit. Thank you very much. I'd like to come on to Roanne. Many of you, I think probably everybody on this call is fully aware, in outline terms at least, of what Julian House does, specifically around the homeless issue in Bath. Roanne, hello. Are you unmuted and are you videoed up? You on?
I'm unmuted. I'm waiting for the host to start my video.
3, 2, 1, and doesn't work, does it? Doesn't work like it does on the telly.
Yeah, here it is.
There you go. Yeah,
Great.
You're on screen. So, hello. How are you doing? How are you doing personally?
Yeah, no, I'm doing really well. I've been homeschooling, so into week 7 of homeschooling, which has been an interesting experience, to say the least.
Oh, that's so euphemistic. Interesting experience. You're fully at liberty to ask a question of Simon in a moment. We're talking about homeschooling, so let's just perhaps start the homeschooling thing for now.
Absolutely, yeah.
And what else? Yeah.
It's been incredibly busy, you know, and I'm just in awe of those our frontline workers. You know, they're still there. They've been surrounded by organisations and businesses all closing down, and very early on, I went to talk to them about our plans to really build resilience into our projects. And you know, they had all of the same anxieties as everybody else around PPE, around infection control, around the vulnerability of our clients, and making sure they continue to get a service. And they've stayed in work. They've been absolutely amazing. So I've got the easy job. You know, the homeschooling is the easy job compared to being, you know, on that kind of client-facing role day in, day out. You know, working long shifts. I'm absolutely remain in awe of them.
And it's lovely of you to pay tribute to the team, and more broadly, it's been one of the good features of this appalling time is how thoughtful and respectful people are about care in the very broadest sense that so many are doing at this vital time. Tell us about the homeless position in Bath immediately pre the lockdown, and what is happening now. How many were regularly on the streets of Bath?
So our last rough sleeper count, which is a single night count, showed that we had 17 people on a single night, but that's not the totality of the number of rough sleepers, because people come and go, people find friends or family to stay with. Then the actual number of people who are in and out or permanently sleeping rough was over 40. So and the people who sleep rough have got a very high risk population. They've got underlying health conditions and really struggle to access healthcare because it's something that they often put off until the very last minute and beyond. So we had a directive from the government at the end of March to house all rough sleepers by the weekend. I think it came on a Thursday night at around 7 o'clock. So that was an interesting announcement, which was helpful to really focus the mind. But we'd already started. We knew that we had to get people in with urgency. The government directive was just confirming work that we had already done through the Baines Homeless Partnership.
Could you talk about that process? Because as I gather, it was 40 places in 3 premises, and was it 3 organisations? There's obviously yourself and Baines, but also DHI.
Yep. Yes.
How did you figure the plan and the control process to make decisions in such short order when it's so vital?
Sure. So hotels were probably the quickest way to house people, and hoteliers in Baines responded really well to our requests and our appeal for help. But we took a strategic decision to do something that has the potential to be more sustainable, and make sure that the people that we are supporting felt like they were coming into a home. And that had the biggest chance then of success. So we have seen in other areas people being evicted from hotels, and it being a really challenging picture because it's not a place that people are used to living in. So we took a bit more time than we were being granted by the government, but we then housed over 40 rough sleepers. So they've gone into accommodation locally that was set up, or they've been reconnected to their hometown. And working with Baines Council, we identified 29 units of accommodation, which we set up in really quick time. And we worked with Curo to set up another 5 accommodation units for some of our hardest to engage, our most complex rough sleepers who've previously been turned down for accommodation. So, you know, it's been a real positive for lots of our clients, because actually the end result of COVID has been accommodation. But during that process, we used local businesses. We were really keen to support the local businesses. So where possible, we had a local cleaning company. We sourced our white goods from a local shop in Bath. And since then, we've worked with DHI, who are the drug and alcohol specialists, and AWP, who provide mental health support, to make sure people were not only as prepared as possible to go into that transition and to go into the accommodation, but then they've got the ongoing support that they need to maintain it. And we've done some really excellent work with DHI so that people who needed methadone scripts, for example, which is a heroin substitute, are able to do that really quickly, are able to access those scripts. And this has meant specialist training for our outreach teams. And what I've got to say is that it's going really well. You know, we've seen people, couples, women, they're engaging with support services more than ever before. They're becoming stable and actually contemplating their future. So it's been really positive.
Isn't it amazing? It's taken a pandemic to be able to sort of coalesce or catalyse that action. And you and the other groups have been able to take people off the streets, put them in safer places in a way that was not imaginable 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago. One practical point, what about the provision of food? How has that worked?
Sure. So we've continued to provide food. We've got Manvers Street Hostel in the centre of town, and we've continued to provide food to all the 20 residents who are either staying at Manvers Street Hostel or staying at another provision. We're also delivering more than 50 meals a day, so that everybody has got at least one cooked meal per day across our accommodation. So that includes some of our other existing hostels as well. And we're continuing to provide out of the back of Manvers Street Hostel, with really appropriate social distancing measures, food every single day in the afternoon. So people are able to access food through Julian House.
And for the companies on this call, of course, money is always useful, particularly when you're facing a funding gap as you have. You cannot run events, you can't have your charity shops and your bike shop open and so on. Yep. Other than money, and please do come forward to the Julian House appeal via their site. What else might they do in terms of giving you any practical support or just support of whatever sort?
I would say just keep an eye on our social media. We've been really clear when we've needed to access certain items, sort of toiletries and things for people. And if we've had sort of a big food ask, we've on sort of really sort of bigger scale, we've asked our social media. So keep an eye on our social media. We had so many volunteers come forward. We're really well resourced in terms of volunteers, and our existing volunteer pool, you know, we had to prioritize them because they were saying, hang on a minute, I've been volunteering for you for ages, what about me? So, you know, we've just had such an amazing response from the community. We're also reopening our bike workshop on Saturday, which is in the centre of town. So please encourage all your employees and yourselves to use that bike workshop from Saturday, because it all helps with our shortfall.
Yeah, we'll publicise that through our social media as well. This hashtag Bath Together, but also our weekly newsletter, which will go out this Thursday, given the bank holiday. One last. So what's going to happen with the Brain of Bath? Have you decided? That's such a sort of coalition point for Bath, and it raises good sums for the charity. Early July, probably not going to happen.
No, still in discussion, but no, can't imagine. But there may be an alternative way of doing it. We're all sat, you know, at home with our microphones on. Who knows? Yeah.
Well, Roanne, we wish you and the team, indeed all the charities of Bath, all the very best in these terrible, troubling times. One thing prior to coming on to Simon, I just want to flag up a little initiative we're going to be doing with Bath Life, which is a Bath Life wine tasting event on May the 13th with Stony Street, who are Bath Life Awards winner for the restaurant category this time round. It's a virtual wine tasting, so they will deliver the wine, and a proportion of the money goes to the Bath Community Shop as well, a really important endeavour in Wootten. So look out for that, and we'll communicate shortly. Let's come on to Simon. If you can just come on screen. Hello, Simon.
Hi there. Hi, everyone. I have noticed, Greg, that you've got a large number of my current parents, former parents, and future parents in your participants this morning. I have noticed that. So I'll be very careful that I'm entirely truthful in everything I say. Right,
that encourages me to be really questioning. No, I do want to explore a number of things personally as well as professionally. So, I mean, personally, what on earth has it been like for you trying to run the business of Kingswood? We'll come on to the teaching shortly. The business of Kingswood in these times.
Yeah, I mean, like with everyone in this current situation, it's extraordinarily challenging. At the same time, you learn in these situations about the people around you, and I've got a fantastic team around me, and I think we're finding our way through some fairly tricky stuff. In terms of the impact on the business, I mean, the biggest thing for us is we want to make sure we're fair on everybody in terms of, because we're a fee-paying school, fair in the way that we run the business. So we've tried our best to charge a fee which is reasonable, but our biggest issue is that we have no boarders here this term. And for us, that's straight away £1 million less income, because we can't charge boarders who aren't here. That would be morally wrong. A boarder over the other side of the world. And so immediately we're starting from that premise. But, we've tried to be creative. We've taken advantage of, you were talking about furloughing staff where possible, obviously not teaching staff. And I think we've found people to be broadly supportive.
And could you give us some rough sense of numbers? I mean, how many sort of full-time staff overall, support staff as well as teaching, and roughly how many are furloughed out of that?
We have about 400 staff. I mean, not all full time. 400 staff across the foundation, of which we've got about 190 on furlough.
And are they all non-teaching? They're support, or are some teaching?
Yeah, non-teaching, and not. We have some people who you'd call I work very closely with the teachers, technicians, if you like, who are on furlough. But we haven't furloughed teaching staff, because we're trying to continue to deliver a full teaching program remotely.
And let's come on to that. How rapidly were you, and for this, broadly, it applies to pretty much all schools, but how rapidly were you able to create remote working packages, processes, timetables? What was that process like managerially?
Good question. This is one for total honesty. We had virtually no notice. We had 1 week before the Easter holidays when we started a program, and that was very much a trial. But we were fortunate enough to have 3 weeks over Easter, where obviously there weren't Easter holidays this year for anyone, were there? But for the staff to get together, and we worked to create a completely new program. We wrote a completely new timetable. We looked at all the research, and so actually, by the time we started back this term 2 weeks ago, we had a completely new program in place, which focused on what we think the key issues are in remote learning. So for instance, pastoral care, we learned from the research, was so very important. The children still feel connected with the school and feel looked after, feel they've got, that they can see their friends and all the things that actually matter in schools, which could disappear very quickly. Lots of interactive teaching, not entirely, because again, the research tells us that you need a balance. Then you have to think about the mental health side of too much screen time. So we created a timetable that took that into consideration. How do you replicate a activities program, which is very important to schools of our type? Obviously, you can't have sports fixtures, but can you do sport in some form? Yes, you can. And all that put together, we wrote a completely new timetable, and we're reviewing that as we go through this term.
What has surprised you about that remote learning? For example, you touched on it's about too much screen time, and we're all doing it right now, but too much screen time. Is it that remote learning is inherently more tiring for the pupils and class-based?
I think that's certainly the case. I think it's also extraordinarily tiring for teachers. I mean, I'm not one to sort of, I know we always say our own professions are tiring, won't we? But teachers obviously work very hard. Of course they do, but this is new. And they're on screen, and they're having to learn lots of new stuff very quickly. I mean, they're used to IT, but they're not used to it in this way. And it is very tiring. That's one of the findings, is that if you're on a screen all day long and you're interacting all day long, that is more tiring than what they would normally be doing. And it's the same for the pupils. So we've changed things like how we do homework and that sort of thing. That's less important at the moment for us. That's our view. Obviously, they're doing a lot of tasks during the day. But I think it's true, and I think you have to remember that, which is why also you don't want to be pushing people into the evening with long sessions. Having said that, the older children, the ones who are in year 12 with A-levels next year, will need to keep going at that sort of level, and we need to balance that in with how their day looks.
Yeah. What's your planning assumption about when some kids at least may be able to come back? There's been so many different things leaked or floated by the government in recent times, including the sense that it's the it's the last year of primary school ahead of going to senior school that cohort will come back first. Do you have any insight? Do you have any expectation of timing?
I have no more insight than anyone else at the moment. I mean, I wrote to all the staff this morning. I sent them something very first thing this morning. So the only thing I can be certain about is the uncertainty of what is going to happen. I think we're fairly clear that we're going to get instructions, probably actually now, not this week, but possibly on Sunday, that some year groups will be returning in June. I think we're going to get that. But the thought of how you can have some year groups in school and some not, how you manage the ones that are in school, exactly with any other business, with social distancing, etc. How do you do that? That's one question. But when you know you might be operating two separate systems, bearing in mind that some of our children are 8 hours different in terms of timing because of where their homes are, is really going to be quite an interesting challenge. So we're doing some planning, but we can't do firm planning until we have government advice on actually what is going to be required. Because as an independent school, we're not used to a great deal of government being told what we're going to do. At the moment, we're having to get used to that.
It might be good for you. You never know.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true.
You never know. Actually, I wanted to explore that might be good for you thing, which I mentioned to you previously, that so many businesses and organisations are finding ways of connecting and reaching out, adding value, whatever. How much of a relationship do the private schools in Bath, and perhaps Kingswood specifically, have with the state schools in trying to help where they can, or at least share war wounds and so on about the difficulties of homeschooling? I think
that's a very good question, and probably puts me on the spot a bit. I mean, we have got close working relationships, as many people know, particularly with St Mark's and with Oldfield. It isn't an area, though, in terms of this remote, the home teaching and the remote teaching, that we have explored yet, partly because we're having to teach ourselves this, and it's been quite an exercise to do that. But I think in terms of our broader partnership work that we do within the city, of course, sharing between all the brilliant schools we've got here, we don't really believe in the private state divide at all, and the more we can do to support each other, always the better. It's an area we need to explore, and it's certainly something that's on my mind.
Yeah, I mean, this is said positively. It may sound negative, but we've heard, privately, as it were, that a number of parents are actually really pleased with how Kingswood specifically have handled this and the quality of remote teaching and resources and so on. It just begs the question, well, if these assets and thinking are there, perhaps they could be shared more widely with other schools. And
that, Greg, is the sort of thinking that I hope we have about everything we do. Yes. And as we learn this, I don't want us to say we're doing it better than anyone else. That wouldn't be a Kingswood way. I don't think this is the way that people should be anyway. We're doing our very best. I'm constantly reminding the staff that the only thing we can do is do our very best, but we can get better at this. And the more we can then share what we have learned and the message and the learning process, the better we will be as a school, and the better it is for our wider community.
I wanted to come back to the business model for the obvious reasons you've expressed about Borders losing, £1 million is a huge sum of money. You have also cut the fees to day school pupils. I think the figure's 15%.
Yeah.
Other schools have cut by a bigger amount. I think Marlborough cut by 30%. And of course, your business shape is very different to all other schools. You have to take your own decisions and so on. Did you talk with other schools beforehand? How did you come to that decision about whatever the level of it is, 15% or some such?
I'm not sure that's a trick question, but we certainly didn't talk to any other schools, because that would be.
I'm not talking about cartels. No.
On an absolutely serious point, that's not something we're allowed to do anyway in any time. So we can't do that. Each school has to look at its own cost base. Whereas you mentioned one of the major boarding schools there, if they cut their fees by 30%, but their children are still at home, our boarding fees have also been cut by significantly more than that. So each school, and I think the model that we have, interestingly, is very similar to the other similar schools in the Bath area and the Bristol area. But we've had to, interestingly, arrive at those decisions independently of each other, which would suggest that we're probably all in about the same place. Schools, most independent schools like us, operate on very tight margins. So we will give everything we can give, but we want to be sustainable. We still want to be here. And, you know, one of the arguments I would give is that, you know, don't think people want us not to be here. And if we gave too much money away now, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
So where we are is where we can be. We would love to give more.
Yeah, I mean, you're expressing a dilemma that pretty much every business faces, how to keep something of the same offering as much as possible, at least the public-facing part of it, whilst pulling those the costs as far as possible and making the reductions which you have. It's all of us face that incredibly tricky balance. I want to come on to question. By the way, everyone, do send your questions in via the Q&A thing. I've just got one here from Louise Kelly at Motors Druid. I should say, by the way, Motors Druid are actually the sponsors of this, so there we are, disclosure. Anyway, she wants to know, will schools consider, and are you already planning to change the summer holidays to allow pupils to catch up, or to run term longer into the holidays, or, or whatever?
Certainly from the very beginning of this, we've talked about that. I think our view would be, it depends a little bit on what happens now and what we have managed to do in the period we're here. I mean, the difficulty of having the uncertainty is we really don't know what we're looking at, but we must consider that. Having said that, I would say that the staff and the pupils, if they carry on, if we've got this program going for the next 10 weeks, are going to need a summer holiday. So the idea that they wouldn't have a summer holiday at all, or even a very short one, is probably not in our minds at the moment. But we're very open to the fact that needs discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, and on a personal note, for those of you who don't know, this is actually Simon's last year as headmaster of Kingswood after 12 years.
12, yeah.
Yeah, a peculiar way to go out on, but you know, you're facing massive challenges, the biggest challenges you've had in your 12 years. So again, as with all, we wish you all the best with that. So
thank you very much. Thank you.
Let's have our other two panelists to rejoin us, as it were. And by the way, if Steph is still on the call, which I assume she is, if you could send me the Q&As, because I'm having difficulty actually reading them. I don't seem to have too many, but I'll come back to them in a moment. So I'd like to ask all of you a couple of questions, and don't feel the need to just simply repeat what someone else has said, because some of these will be a bit familiar, I'm sure. But if you've got some new insights, so what has surprised you positively about how your teams, or indeed others, have responded to these strange times?
So for me, we've moved into the 21st century. We spend so much time online and, you know, working with other local authorities, and it's been amazing. We use Microsoft Teams, and the staff feedback on it has been fantastic. I think we are really keen to make sure that there is a really positive technology legacy for Julian House and for the third sector as a whole. So I think it's been really very, very lots of smart working going on. It's great.
And that's good to hear. I'm sure that's true of many businesses and organisations. A smart technology legacy, that's much desired. Allison or Simon, what has surprised you positively in addition to the use of technology?
I think it surprised me positively. I would hope this would be the case, but I think that how adaptable people have been, and I mean in our context, I mean children and staff and parents, of course, because one of the things about home learning is a lot of the parents, it's a real challenge for them, of course, particularly with the younger children. So adaptability, I think, and resourcefulness, things that we always talk about, and we want people to be adaptable and resourceful. This has come out the blue, hasn't it? And we've had to change completely how we do something. So the resourcefulness and adaptability. I did an assembly piece this morning for all the children, and about what we might learn from the lockdown, and I do think, I really genuinely think that being more resourceful, more resilient, more adaptable, it definitely feels to me as though there could be positives to come out of this rather difficult situation. Yeah,
Alison, your thoughts on this?
I would obviously echo. I mean, it goes without saying, I have an adaptable and resourceful team, so I'm not a massive surprise that they continue to be that. But what I've been really pleased by is we always have felt that we worked in partnership, but I feel that our partnership working has been really strengthened by this. So the way that the cleansing team from, I mean, it's very janitorial, but the way that the cleansing team from Baines Council have worked so closely with the bid rangers, so that there's no duplication of effort, and if one person's got one bit of kit and the other person's got the other bit, there's no sort of boundaries. We just go, well, let's do it together and let's get it done. And that's been really fantastic. And I know they've been working really closely with your team, Roanne. They've been, because we have someone on the street every morning. If we notice a new person, a vulnerable person sleeping on the street, then we immediately notify Roanne's team every morning. And, you know, that sort of collaboration, we've always done it, but I feel like it's really come to the fore and we're doing it even better. And we've adopted WhatsApp, which I've wanted them to do for ages. So, so that's really good.
Well, I mean, we'll come on to the degree to which the positive changes may or may not endure, but I want to give the companion piece question. What have you been surprised at negatively? Alison, you mentioned that there's been a crop of graffiti and so on. What about how people are responding to this? Because you're pretty much at the front line and you're seeing how people are, you know, navigating the city such as they are. So tell us about perhaps some of the negative points you've experienced.
Well, obviously the graffiti is really disappointing, and the amount of unpleasant things that the Rangers are still having to pick up. The birds haven't gone away, but that's not a surprise, I suppose. But I do think that people are behaving very well. So one of the challenges we've had is that it's difficult to clean Waitrose in the morning because people are queuing to get into Waitrose at 6:45. And so the Rangers had to go in earlier and earlier in order to be able to clean the pavement in front. So I do think generally the public are being really responsible. And in fact, you know, if you talk to the police, we haven't had as much shoplifting as you might, not shoplifting, but breaking of window. Obviously they can't shoplift. But breaking of windows, there was unfortunately one this weekend, but there hasn't been as much of that as you might have anticipated in an empty city. And so I know you want me to do doom and gloom, but that's not my nature anyway. But
your answer almost illustrates the point that I was thinking, which is that in the worst of times, people show their best. And there actually has been very little bad behaviour. I mean, just to perhaps pick up with Roanne, that, you know, at times, some people have not been, I'll put it in these terms, not been positive towards homeless people. Do you think there's been a bit of a sea change, or is that pie in the sky?
No, I do think there's been a change, and those times are few and far between. I mean, it's difficult to find any negativity. I did anticipate some and concern that, you know, homeless people will be more likely to spread infection and things. We just haven't had any of those things. So it's been really, really amazing. I think we faced some challenges at the very beginning because Manvers Street Hostel had 20 residents and people were hanging around outside. And so there was some concern from neighbours. But arguably those people became such a settled population that they were actually a household, and so socially distancing didn't actually need to happen between them. But nonetheless, we split Manvers Street Hostel, and so we moved 10 people out, and now we only have 10 people there, and it's all working really, really well. I think the challenge is going to come as we start to return back to some form of normality and trying to communicate the speed of that to our clients, and they may want it to be much further ahead, like we all do, than it actually is. So I think communication is going to be key in the recovery from the COVID crisis.
Well, let's come on to that longer term point, the legacy. And Simon, do you think, I'll put it in these terms, do you think we're about to usher in a Wesleyan era where people are doing all the best? What's that Wesleyan quote about doing all the best you can for as many?
All the best you can for all the people you can at all the times you can, and one or two other bits on top of that. But yeah. I hope so. I mean, obviously I hope so. I'm an educationalist. I'm bound to believe in that, and I'm the head of a Wesleyan school, a Methodist school. So, but I do think the interesting observations people made there. My feeling is that for many people, this sort of thing can be a watershed, and in the way that they perceive broader society. And so, obviously, we hope that will be the case. I think there's a lot of challenges to come ahead, and we're going to need to be strong in our communities. Within the city, within our own smaller communities. So I'm certainly hopeful of that. And there's certainly great evidence we've just heard there of where that might already be happening.
Yeah, I mean, if you take the really big picture, the World War II with all the legacy it had, the Blitz, VE Day, which we're going to be celebrating this 75th anniversary this Friday, and all of that, and out of that horror and terror came the NHS, the most interventionist government, the most state-ordered society imaginable. Do you think we're going to have, on a bigger scale, anything like that, or will we revert, whether politically, economically, or in terms of companies, to the same old, same old? Is this a step change?
I think that's very difficult. I said we would like it to be. I don't know whether we can compare it to I know there's a lot of comparisons going on, isn't there, to the war, after the war. I just feel there is in there a sense that people are caring more about other people, and therefore I think there's a potential for change. Yes, how big that will be, I don't know. One of the things that I'm very worried about is the level of the businesses, parents' businesses, that's where I'm coming from, are struggling. You know, they're going to need help. I hope that help will come naturally through society as a whole.
Right. Perhaps Roanne or Allison would like to comment on that bigger picture, potential sea change, and maybe some enduring values the other side. Do you not?
Well, I think that I think you're absolutely right. One of the areas, though, that I'm quite interested in is sustainability and the environment, because it's been really kind of an interesting source of conflict, I suppose. But in our conversations about people coming back to the city centre, I mean, visitors and, you know, residents coming back into the city centres, apparently one of the advantages that Bath has is it's one of the few cities that you can actually drive into in your car in your nice, you know, clean bubble, I suppose, in relative security, get out, do whatever it is you might want to do, you know, socially distancing in the city centre, and then leave again. You don't actually have to use public transport because of the way that our car parks are configured. And so now we're all used to doing our daily exercise and walking much more and cycling much more, but I'm wondering whether that will continue beyond the immediate phase, when you're allowed to go a little bit further than you can walk. People aren't going to rush to jump back on the trains or the buses, are they? And it'd be interesting to see how sustainability comes back up the agenda, I suppose. Having, you know, we've all learnt to bake our own bread using sourdough yeast and so on. It's, you know, we have all a bit sort of adapted to it slightly more feet on the ground, you know, way of living, and or will we maintain that, I guess, it's a question rather than something I have the answer to.
Yeah, I mean, there are very, there's a whole load of peculiar legacies. I'll say one very personally, that my mother's generation was World War II and rations and so on. And as a result, I grew up with an absolute stricture. You had to clean your plate every time. You did not throw away food. And I bore our family with, you know, and of course, I don't do that to that extent these days, but to some extent I still do. So that legacy does carry over in weird societal ways. Ryan, I want to come to a couple of questions for you. One is from Jonathan Walker at number 15, hotel on Great Colony Street. The general point is, when we go back to whatever normal is, how can local companies work together to support people specifically so that there is zero homeless, to start from the point of zero homelessness in Bath in the future? Are there key actions that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, that has to be the aim. You know, there's no tolerance for people sleeping rough on our streets. It's a completely outrageous situation to be in. I mean, I think the key actions are to keep reporting. So the earlier we can get to somebody and support them and offer them a way off the streets, the quicker the intervention, the quicker the support, the quicker the exit from homelessness. So keep reporting through streetlink.org, which is the reporting line. I think we again have to reach out to our private rented sector. You know, what we've seen now, we knew it was the case anyway, but if you house people, they will change. You know, asking people to change whilst they're not sure where they're going to be sleeping that night, or they are sure and it's in a car park, is just a really challenging ask. And even though, you know, people present a lot of antisocial behaviour, a lot of risk, etc., when you house them, that all of that lowers, and one of the biggest things we've seen amongst our couples, which we were really, we did some really thorough risk assessment around housing our couples because of the level of domestic abuse that we'd seen between them, not just physical, coercion, control. Sometimes the men are the victims, not just the women, or you're not sure who's the victim, who's the perpetrator. What we've seen when we've housed those people, and it has been a big risk, is that the domestic abuse has either completely disappeared or it's a very low level that we can work with. So those couples, we can work with them to try and address some of that poor relationship that they have with each other. But taking away that pressure of not having accommodation for the night has meant that a lot of those issues have dramatically reduced. So I think trying to find enough accommodation for people, and then making sure we've got a good support contract, because the support is key, is the way forward. So I know it sounds obvious, but keep reporting, and let's all together try and put some pressure on our private rented landlords and get some accommodation into the stock. And we do rely on Curo, and they have been amazing, but we just need more.
Thank you, and also thank you to Jonathan for that question. I think your phrase there, if you house people, they will change, is incredibly resonant. I mean, I guess it's self-evident, but when it's put in such a clear way, it's compelling as a start point for whatever the new era might be. I'd like to thank you. I'd like, again, for you, Roanne, but perhaps throw it open as well. From Kerry-Ann Gould of Wilson's Family Tea, was it easier to place people in accommodation because the city has been empty, and separately related to that, a lack of footfall must have affected the opportunity for street begging? Did this help or hinder you?
Yeah, I mean, it did help, definitely. So one of the things that we've done, and we've really learnt from where we've had what are called drug-related deaths in Baines, where we've had people die from drug overdoses, we know that when people come into accommodation, their risk goes up in terms of their drug use. So one of the things that we did before we housed people was use a kind of carrot and stick approach. So if they wanted the accommodation, which was self-contained, it's a good offer of accommodation, they had to go on that methadone script, which is the heroin substitute. And it was a risky strategy. We didn't know how it was going to pan out, but people took up the offer of the methadone script, are really stable, and the accommodation was worth taking that offer, worth making that commitment. But it does make a difference that there is a lack of income from the streets. That's a help at the moment. What is challenging is that there are a couple of people who are determined, that's the lifestyle that they lead. They haven't been able to battle their addiction, but we're not seeing huge amounts of crime from our client group at all. We're working really closely with the police to keep an eye on that, but we're really not. People are staying in, by and large, they are staying in, and they are thinking about the future in a positive way.
Really good. Allison, in your experience with the Rangers and your team, are people staying in? Has there been a gradual easing that perhaps with better weather, and it's going to be excellent weather this week apparently, are you seeing more people on the street in the centre?
To be absolutely honest, I haven't looked at the footfall figures this week, so I can't tell you with any sort of confident determination. Only the AA says that there are more cars on the road, so on that basis, I imagine there are more people in the city centre of Bath. But it is creeping up, and more shops are opening. Although Greg's hasn't quite opened yet, has it? But perhaps that will make all the difference. I think they're worried actually that if they do open, there'll be queues around the block because people are so missing their whatever it is, steak pasty. But so my hunch would be yes, but I can't tell you confidently because I haven't seen the footfall figures for last week. But yes, it's been gradually creeping back up again.
One of the biggest issues that government and thereby our wider society faces is that level of confidence. That there was a poll in the Observer yesterday. I think the figures were something like 67% of the UK populace from that poll don't wish to go back too early. There's fear out there. Aguero, the Man City footballer, made the exact same point. From the Premiership coming back, they may be footballers, but they're also parents and brothers and whatever. How do you, in your organisations, and slightly more widely through Bath, how do we address that fear that people don't want to be proximate to people because they think they're going to get coronavirus?
Well, for us, there's an awful lot of strategic work going on with the council and Visit Bath. Because one of the risks is that if we make a huge announcement, I don't know if you saw, but in some other countries where they make a huge announcement to say, you know, we're open again, and people come in a rush, and especially with Bath having a lot to offer in the open air, there's a really good chance that people will think, oh, Bath, we can just walk round and there won't be anybody else there, even if we don't go into Marks and Spencer's or whatever else, you know, close proximity type of place. So it's something that we're grappling with actually as a partnership group, to make sure that we dribble out messages and look at coordinating openings. So, for example, when the Roman Baths opens, do we open all the museums on the same day, or do we actually try and taper that so that people are gradually coming back into the city, and so to make people feel secure as well as to be confident as a city that we're offering something that's safe and secure. And all of the measures about distancing actually out of doors are things that are being really closely looked at and planned at the moment.
Indeed. If I could ask the same point to Simon, there will be many parents, and some of them on this call will be thinking, you know what, I actually don't want my kids to go to school, because it's going to be virtually impossible to sort of police that social distancing and so on. It's just too big a risk. I'm actually going to keep my kid home. How do you respond to that fear? What reassurance can you give?
Yeah, I think that's a really tough one. I think that the generally a lot of this is, and it's what Allison was talking about, lots about communication. So you've got to be in touch with your customers, if you like, and be part of a dialogue. But I think realistically, we're going to be looking at the evidence, and the decisions about returns to school is going to be based on evidence, so we're told. And so we need to understand that, and we put in place what we can do and be honest about what we can't do. How will you persuade someone to come back into school if they don't feel comfortable doing that? I think it's a really difficult question, because there's going to be a lot of that, I suspect. And I think we need to be adaptable in the way I said before to how we deliver the education until we're at a stage when everyone can be back in school. It's very much the current discussions is how do we do that? Because there are going to be people, including teachers, who coming back to school in the near future will not be something they're very comfortable with at all.
Yeah. Well, just to press you on that point, and I'm using you as a sort of proxy for all schools, and there are a lot of parents with many kids. What actually happens if a parent says, I'm sorry, I hear all of that, I understand social distancing, I'm sure you're going to put in place good stuff and so on, but no. How would you respond as an educationalist, and also as a business with fees and so on? How do you respond to that? They simply refuse because it's too much of a risk.
I haven't got as far as deciding what I will do. All I would say is I think each case is individual. It might be some people have it's a genuine issue that we genuinely, and for others it might just be an irrational fear. So I think you can't probably generalize too much about these things. I suppose when it comes to education, compulsory education, children are meant to be in schools. If the law is saying they should be in schools, then you would go to that, I guess. But you've got to be very careful as a business, haven't you, that what you're providing is safe and secure at the same time. So I think it's a massive challenge, and it ends up being a dialogue, communication, and it ends up being based on facts, I guess, and the facts seem to be quite hard to get hold of at the moment. But you know, it's one of my concerns is that we're going to have to find a way to get everyone back into school, and it's not all going to be at the same time.
Yeah. One last question for you each. Are you optimistic? And if so, why?
Shall I go first on that one?
Watch out.
Yes, because I think there are some positives that we can learn from this. What I do think is that if we're pushed too soon into doing something that clearly doesn't make a lot of sense, then I'm not happy about that. But I think there is light there. We will get through this. I don't think there's any way you can think about this other than in an optimistic way in that sense. But I think that has to be alongside a sensible level of caution.
Roanne, you optimistic?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I've never seen such good partnership working in Baines. You know, public health and housing, everybody is working together, and there is a real determination that there will be a positive legacy from the pandemic from an accommodation point of view. So we are planning our exit strategy with Baines Council, and I feel very optimistic about the future.
Alison, aside from the very specifics which you've addressed about city centre businesses and so on, are you optimistic?
On a personal level, I'm optimistic because I don't think there's any other way to be. You can't go forward if you don't have optimism. But it's that expect the best and plan for the worst, I think, is probably what I'm doing. So there's a lot of obviously reforecasting and forecasting of our budgets and anticipating that our membership is going to look quite different. But then the positive bit about that is that change is always stimulating, and we'll do our best to respond to whoever our new membership is.
And seize those positives. I think it's time to wrap up. We're just through 11 o'clock, but in closing, a few things. Firstly, thanks again to Motors Druitt, our sponsor of the Bath Life Business Club, the real ones, which will return at some point. Thank you to Allison, to Simon and to Roanne as our speakers today. Reminder that next week's Bath Life Business Club on this time, 10 o'clock Monday morning, is hospitality. It's a wider panel we have, and we'll be asking questions about the broader impacts through the city and so on, as well as through the sector for hospitality. Do look out for that slightly odd Bath Life wine tasting event on May the 13th with proceeds to the Bath Community Shop. And I think in closing, it seems to us that, and it's a piece that we've been trying to put out there as well in our comms, that even in the toughest, the worst times, enduring good can come from this. But it's actually up to us, and this is the whole responsibility is much more devolved probably than it's ever been. It's up to us at one end, which is the comm side, to find the good stuff to celebrate, to exchange the hashtag Bath together or whatever the iteration might be, to get the good stuff out there, to help inspire and buoy up all of us in these terrible times. But far more importantly, it's about seizing the good stuff that's there and making sure it's enduring the other side. Because ultimately, the future is unwritten and it's up to us to write it. It's as basic as that. It really is boomerang time to us, to all these 100 or so on this call, to make sure that we do learn from this and apply as far as possible the good stuff. Because even if only modestly, the world can be changed for the good from this experience. These have been really, really tough times, but all of us have to remember that this too shall pass. So this has been a Media Clash production. This has been the virtual Bath Life Business Club. I'm absolutely delighted that so many have joined it, and thank you for your time. Thank you.